Hi guys, thanks for the great show. I recently stumbled across the Dynamic Dudes, a late 1980s surfer gimmick that seems to have gone over like a turd in a punch bowl. In both matches I watched, the dudes tried to interact with some kids pre-match, somewhat unsuccessfully. Are there any stories you can recall about disastrous interactions between babyfaces and kids, or any memories of the Dynamic Dudes?
The
Dynamic Dudes or their inception? I was surprised to see Shane Douglas and Johnny Ace in that rancid gimmick and felt bad for them trying to get it over in front of a salty Philadelphia crowd.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing, and I hate to blame my friend Jim Ross, but JR wanted to not recreate, but he wanted another young type of Rock and Roll Express tag team that the kids would be into, and the surfboarding and skateboarding and all that boarding was a big deal back then. And he basically took two underneath baby faces, Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas, that they weren't doing anything with, put them together as a team to wear all the neon colors and ride the skateboard and do all of that sort of thing. The problem was Johnny Ace couldn't ride a skateboard. In addition to not being able to wrestle, he couldn't ride a skateboard. So Shane had to do that. Shane was the one that did all the athletic shit. Johnny just wore the clothes well because he looked like that was something that he would wear in his real life. Because it was just the most heat-getting, obnoxious, fucking babyface gimmick I've ever seen. And I mean, there's been a lot of problems with when baby faces, especially ones that aren't over very well, try to interact with children. I've seen guys throw their T-shirt out and the fans throw it back or whatever the fuck. But the Dynamic Dudes have to be the most unpopular intended baby faces I've ever fucking seen. And it was in Philadelphia, the famous night that the Midnight Express was wrestling the Dynamic Dudes. Of course, it was in Philly, so the people are cheering the Midnight Express anyway. But then they start chanting, "Johnny sucks dick. Johnny sucks dick. Johnny sucks dick." And me and Bobby and Stan are dying laughing, and we're trying to cover it up. And I said, why did they get that started? All of a sudden I look up, and in the top balcony of the Philly Civic Center, somebody's written on a giant bed sheet, like 12 feet square, "Johnny sucks Shane's dick." And they've hung it over. So there's 6,000 people chanting, "Johnny sucks dick, Johnny sucks dick." And then they're getting the heat on fucking Johnny Ace in the match, right? And Bob Eaton brings him over and puts his head over the middle rope for me to take a shot with the racket, right? But I turned around and walked away from him. So then later on after the match, Johnny asked me, he said, "Jim, why didn't you take the cheap shot with the racket?" I said, "I didn't want to get too close to you, Johnny. I was afraid of snipers." And so he's sitting there. Finally, we're in the locker room upstairs to Civic Center because they were upstairs. And he's sitting there. He's taking his boots off, and he kind of gets up, and he's got his towel, and he's got his head down, and he's wandering off. And Stan said, "Where are you going, Johnny?" He said, "Well, I guess I'm just going to suck Shane's dick," as he walked into the shower. It was very demoralizing. Yeah, that was the most unpopular baby faces I think I've ever come across.
Let me ask you a few questions about this, because there is something to look at here. I was 9 years old when the Dynamic Dudes hit, and I think there were ways it could have worked. So let me start by asking this.
With at least one different person in it.
Well, at least, let's say it was Shane and someone else. Let's say it was Shane and Tom Zink, just to throw a name out there.
Oh, Jesus Christ. What do you hate Shane Douglas?
Well, let me ask you this. First of all, the Dynamic Dudes as situated, Johnny Ace and Shane, would that gimmick, no changes, that personnel, no changes, have worked in the WWF?
No, I don't think so. Because I think that it was one of those deals where the guys involved, because I mean, Shane was not a fluorescent green tight wearing skateboard riding type of guy, but at least he could ride the skateboard if you held a gun to him. But neither one of the gimmick didn't fit him. There wasn't any part of their personality that thing fit. And so I think that's the problem. Of course, it was a bad gimmick on top of that, with bad clothing in a bad promotion that was being run by a complete fucking idiot and was dying as we watched it. But even if it was two guys, even in the WWF, it wouldn't have worked because it was the two wrong guys for the thing. And I don't think they would have fucking pushed that thing very long either. I mean, they've had some stinkers also, but it boils down to, no, the gimmick didn't fit the guys. It wasn't a very good gimmick anyway, and it was being, presented by a fucking rotten promotion, but I don't think it would have flown up there either. And they were more accepting of cartoon wrestling, those fans.
See, what I always think about is what the possibilities would have been if it was different people in the team, and maybe if there were some changes to the clothing and the gimmick, because skateboarding was really, really big in youth culture at that time. At that time, there was a great game on Nintendo, Skate or Die. There was Gleaming the Cube, which was a really cool movie when I was a kid with Christian Slater, and they had Tony Hawk and the Bones Brigade and all these people in it. And, there was skateboarding in different Police Academy 4 and a big skateboarding scene. It was a big thing. Like, people my age at that time were skateboarding or discovering skateboarding. So I do think, like, is there anything that could have been done, or was it just that gimmick, no matter who did it in the NWA, because it was a kids-themed gimmick, could never have worked?
Yeah, well, and that was the worst of all places to do it, because they were specifically the wrestling fans that were watching WCW, because they didn't want the cartoon bullshit haha wrestling that the WW kids wrestling that the WWF was giving them. They weren't going to like that. It was all part of, Herd's thing is, instead of doing our own thing because we have our own audience, we've got to copy what the WWF is doing and not do it as well. That's why you like the ding dongs for the kids. It's fucking complete horseshit. But maybe some type of skateboarding gimmick with an actual really good skateboarder could have worked. But if you notice, and it's not like I've paid a lot of close attention to, the major skateboarders, but most of those fucks are about 140 pounds and all the tattoos and fucking, goofy haircut or whatever. And, that wouldn't have worked then, because wrestlers at that time had to be grown adult men that looked like they could whip somebody in a fight. Now, have these fucking pro skateboarders look like Andre the Giant next to some people that'd be in fucking ring and on some outlaw shows. So it might be a little easier to fucking fly now, perhaps. I don't know. I think we're probably spending a lot of time on something that ain't never going to happen anyway.
I've said this before on the show. One of my big disappointments when I discovered NWA in the spring of 1989, I was told by kids at school, you got to check it out. It's on at 6 o'clock on TBS. And I missed it for the first month because I was tuning in at 6 o'clock, and by 6:05, I'd given up.
Yeah.
And I was told that, here's what I was told. There are 5 guys bigger than Andre. And there's a team called the Road Warriors, and they wear spikes on their shoulders that they stab people with. And those aren't even the most egregious things that were wrong. The one that was, and there's a team, the Dynamic Dudes, and they ride skateboards covered in blood. That's the line that got me, and I was so disappointed when I saw them. And they weren't riding the skateboards, A, and B, there was no blood anywhere.
Yeah. And actually, the skateboards were not covered in blood. They were covered in Johnny Ace's tears.
Or Shane Douglas's jism. Who knows what was going on backstage?